Some people love a great legacy game. I am not one of those people. Let's talk about why. Legacy games as a whole have reached a peak, in my humble opinion. If you look at the top 100 on Board Game Geek, now take that for what it is, it's Board Game Geek, so opinions vary. There are only 6 legacy games, or campaign games, depending on which way you want to look at it, on that list. 3 of them are Pandemic Legacy, 0, 1, and 2. 2 of them are Gloomhaven, and Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. And 1 is 7th Continent, and that's a bit of an exception story-based game, maybe? I could probably wrap it into there, so either way. They have a shelf life. And the pandemic didn't do legacy games any favors. Mainly because it's a lot harder to get the same group together all the time, which is a bit of a problem for me when it comes to legacy games as a whole. You have to have that experience with the same group over and over. You have to, or it's not going to work. Now, there are exceptions to all of these rules, and I realize that. But you get the best experience in Pandemic if you play all 12 sessions with the same group of people. So you have that same experience. Now, Pandemic Legacy was, without spoilers, about you would rip and destroy different parts of the game. It was never playable again. Once you played through once, it was over. And you got a 12-game experience for $60, $75, whatever the price may be where you are. Some people say that's enough for the best gaming experience they've ever had. No, not for me. Board games stay with me. They grow with me. I play them and I see the new experiences over and over and over and get to have that experience multiple times. And yes, a lot of people say, you know, you can't get upset about having 12 experiences and then have to throw the game away. Yes, I can. I very much can. And I will. In fact, I do. Because it's just, it takes away from it. Those memories and things. I play video games for that. I really do. And by the way, video games, I can play them again. I can most of the time. There are exceptions to every rule, and I understand that. But these games, they may create a rich narrative that's fun and exciting. And I love story in board game, but crafting and creating one is also fun. And crafting and creating one that you can never do again, even though it could go differently the next time you play it, I'm not here for it. Now, Jamie Stegmaier solved part of that problem that I have with these games by making Charterstone. Charterstone is a legacy game where you play throughout the legacy campaign, and then with all the stickers you put down, you now just have your own board of Charterstone. It's just your own board with your own worker placement game. That's a great idea. Now, where he fell short, in my mind, on that is the game's not very good. Once you have the full worker placement aspect game on the board, it's just not that fun. It's very boring. And the legacy part was what really brought in the enjoyment. It's not, to me, it seems that most of the times I play legacy games, it's not to play the game itself. It's to see what box I'm going to open next that's going to add to the game. It's the excitement of the dopamine rush that your body and your mind gets from something new being included. But once it's been introduced, I don't care anymore. It's okay, it's there. Cool, what now? It's not there. It sets an unrealistic expectation from the beginning that things are going to keep changing and maneuvering and being different and exciting. I have to assume that every single one of those changes is going to be different and exciting to me. I have to assume that I'm going to want to continue using those differences and excitements, and I'm not gonna. Not all the time, and it's not worth the risk for me. It sets you up to get excited about something and then having it end, or get excited something about it and not like it. It's not a good setup for me. I like the direction Jamie Stegmaier took it in. I don't think there's ever excuses anymore for destroying components. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's, frankly, I find it a little insulting. I don't enjoy it. I think it's very much something I would never, ever, ever do to a game, no matter what. Stickers, however, did change things a little bit. Gloomhaven put the stickers on the different things, and it doesn't really even ruin too much of it. And you can get a reusable sticker sheet for those types of things and do it again if you're really interested. Now, obviously, Gloomhaven was never meant to be finished. Isaac Childress, when he made Gloomhaven, didn't exactly anticipate that every Tom, Dick, and Harry would finish that game. It was so resoundingly successful that Frosthaven's coming out eventually. But now, what does the successful legacy games tell you? It went up, 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 up. It was at the top of its game, and then now it's just gone. You have things like Clank Acquisitions Incorporated, which people love, but it's nowhere near the top 100. Or the Queensdale, I believe. There's a couple of there's some really successful ones that are successful as any average board game, but average board game. These 6 games that I just mentioned off, next year won't be in the top 100. Not all of them. I think Pandemic's Legacy Season 0 might fall off, but that's about it. Maybe the other 5. But those are the cult classics of this genre. Those are the games from this genre that you point to and say, you want to play a good Legacy game? These are it, right here. And 5 of them are from 2 genres of Gloomhaven and Pandemic. Did you ever think that maybe people just like Gloomhaven and Pandemic? And any ad or variation to it is something they'll do? I mean, there's how many Pandemics exist? Dozens. And the only things Gloomhaven has is Gloomhaven and Jaws of the Lion, and whenever you do those, you touch them and they turn to gold. And Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is an intro series that you can just take the characters from and put directly into Gloomhaven as well. That's why the ratings are so high. Now, are campaign games different than legacy games? Sure, they are. But, I mean, look at Mechs vs. Minions. It was a programming game, really fun in that aspect, but it was, every time I think about reopening, it's like, oh, there's that story element that you connect everything to and carry over, and I don't want to do that. I just don't want to do that. Look at Near, Far, and Above and Below. I'm starting to hear now, a couple years later, that most people are preferring Above and Below because it's more gameplay than it is story. Now, Near and Far was heavy on the story and had gameplay. I owned one. I owned Near and Far, and I traded it away because the gameplay just suffered underneath the story. It just wasn't as strong. The story was okay, but it wasn't as strong. And if I'm going to buy a story-based game in any iteration of any kind, it's going to be Tales of Arabian Nights, or maybe even Seventh Continent. I'm still debating on Seventh Continent realistically, but it's all story. That's all it is. It's a story-based game, and that's what it is. And this is what you pay for it. That's it. And that's what I'm looking for in that type of game. Other than that, yeah, I want to be able to play my game again. That's the difference, and I have this problem with a lot of people. That's the difference between board games and video games. One of the many is that I want to be able to play that game again, no matter what, and then trade it away when I'm done. If I'm done. Some of these games I've had for almost 5-10 years. And that's not the same in video games because it's just, okay, a lot of the times you install it on Steam, play it, uninstall it, and maybe you play it again. But even games like that, or for PlayStation or Xbox or whatever you do, so games like that, not for me. You could argue that Scythe has a legacy game in the top 100 because of Rise of Fenris. But what I liked about Rise of Fenris, now I didn't play it, but what I liked about the idea of Rise of Fenris is you have the base game of Scythe that exists. If you want to play a legacy game of Scythe, you just buy Rise of Fenris and you still have Scythe. That game still exists. That is something I could be intrigued by. Clank Incorporated did that, where it has the base game of Clank, you can have that, no problem, and then it has a legacy thing involved as well. You buy separately. That I can get behind. I can get behind that idea as more of a continuation than an ending. And I like how that's set up. I like how it's determined. I like how it all spans. But the problem that I'm having with legacy games in general is they had to adapt. The legacy games that adapted, sticker sheets, this, that, the other thing. The old days of Legacy, like Pandemic Legacy that blew the game up, Pandemic Legacy was a brilliantly designed game. But games like Pandemic Legacy can't happen anymore. They had to adapt. And they have adapted, but it's still not enough for me. I need games to continue. This is the same type of feeling that Roll and Writes was having. That time where Railroad Inc., Cartographers still is pretty popular, but games like that just came out of nowhere, and now everyone was making a roll and write. There were roll and write versions of Nations, like of any game that you could find, there was a roll and write version of it. It was a fad, it was a phase. Worker placement had the same thing. Worker placement is probably close to an exception because of how much enjoyment people get out of worker placements, but if you were playing during this time, like 3 or 4 years ago, worker placements were popping up everywhere. They were everywhere. And everybody screamed for more variety. And they had to pump in some different type of variety or switch up. Same with deck building games. All the games were the same for a while with the Ascension type style. And then they had to switch it up with schemes or different deck building or card play in them because they needed variety to keep up and make people less unsatisfied. And then the pandemic hit for legacy games, and it didn't do them any favors, because how many of us are getting to the table with a bunch of friends at all? Maybe the people we live with or close friend groups or something like that, but 12 times? No chance. No chance. And I mean, I don't even understand. With Gloomhaven, I understand the love for it and how brilliant the mechanics are. I get it. I do. But how do you buy that game and think, I can't wait to play all these missions? Wait, how? With who? I mean, do you have that dedicated of a friend group? Maybe you do. And if you do, great. But if you don't, I can't recommend it. Unless you play solo. You can play solo too, but I just wasn't into it. But like, there's so much detail and weird switch ups when it comes to legacy games that I don't think legacy games have the staying power. I think this is a fad. I think it's going to filter off. We'll go back to maybe campaign games and stuff like that, but the pure definition of a legacy game, I just don't think is for our time anymore. You can tell a great story and create a great narrative within any game if you try. And legacy games made it so we didn't have to try as hard. That the designer could build that for us and could build the narrative that we were trying to make and walk us through it, handhold us. But we don't have to have that to get that really good, rich narrative experience. So when you're telling a story through a board game, just rethink about how you're tooling things and rethink about where the dopamine is hitting and what it's really doing for you. Do you enjoy reading the story? Maybe you need Tales of Arabian Nights. Do you enjoy the gameplay? Maybe you need Gloomhaven. But a pure legacy, it's just not for me. It may be for you, and I hope it is. But for me, it's a breed that I can see die out, and I won't be upset. I just won't. So, do you have any legacy games that you really like that you think break the mold that I'm talking about? Leave it in the comments below. My name's Nick, aka Until May. I stream on Twitch 2 to 3 days a week. Check my socials in the description, and a lot of change coming, a lot of good stuff. So, see you next time.
Through the wastelands, through the highways, and